My name is Helen Parker. I am 68. I have silver hair I keep in a short curl. I make good apple pie. I laugh too loud sometimes. I have a small house with a blue door and a garden where I grow tomatoes. I love my son, David, and my two grandchildren, Lily and Ethan. I always thought family was the safest place in the world. The day everything changed was my birthday. We had a little party in the backyard. Balloons. Paper plates. David brought a big tray of fried chicken. Melissa made a fruit salad that smelled like cinnamon. Lily and Ethan ran in circles. Neighbors sat on folding chairs. The sun was warm. People smiled and took pictures. Halfway through the party, right after the cake, David stood up with a glass in his hand. He cleared his throat like he was about to make an important announcement. The music stopped. "Everyone," he said loud so the kids stopped playing. "We have something to say. Mom won't be living with us anymore. We've decided to put her in a home." The words hit the air like a stone. For a second, the world felt strange. The laughter died. Plates were forgotten. Lily and Ethan went quiet and looked at me like I was a stranger. People stared at me. My heart beat fast. My throat felt dry. I felt something warm in my eyes, but I smiled. I smiled because I wanted my grandchildren to see me calm, to keep them from getting scared. I smiled because sometimes a smile hides more than words can say. I had my phone in my hand. I had brought it to take pictures of the kids. My thumb found the screen without thinking. I opened an app. I clicked a button. The screen lit up. A small video began to play. Melissa's smile faded the way a candle does when someone blows on it. Her face went white. She had never expected the video that started playing. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then sound filled the backyard. Voices on the phone, a small living room light flickering on the screen. The first frame froze for a breath. I swallowed, and then I let the video run. Before I tell you what happened next, you should know how we got there. You should know the long, slow story that made that birthday afternoon crack open like an egg. I raised David on my own after his father left when David was 3. I worked at the library for 30 years. I shelved books and taught story time to toddlers. I taught David how to tie his shoes and how to ride a bike without the training wheels. When he fell, I held him and told him to try again. When he went to college, I saved pennies in a jar and mailed him an envelope with a check and a note that said, "I'm proud of you." He called every Sunday at 5. He came home for holidays. He met Melissa at a coffee shop. He married her in a small ceremony with paper flowers. I was happy for him. I thought he had everything. After he had kids, he and Melissa moved into a house near mine. They said it would be easier for the kids. They said I could come over whenever I wanted. I babysat. I baked. I sat with Lily while she did homework. I watched Ethan practice the piano. I fixed the screen door. I celebrated birthdays. I thought this was the life we were building together. Little cracks began months earlier. They were small at first, like hairline cracks in glass. Melissa would call and ask if I could watch the kids at the last minute, and then say thank you in a voice that sounded like I was doing something extra special. David seemed tired more often. He started staying late at work. He stopped coming by for coffee. Once, when I brought a casserole, Melissa said, "We have something special already." She didn't smile. One evening, Lily came to my house and sat on my lap. She said, "Grandma, Mommy says you make the house smell like old people." Her small face was puzzled, like she had heard a strange word. I felt a stab of hurt, but I hugged her and told her she was silly. I thought Melissa had been joking. Later, Lily told me that Mommy had said it while she was on the phone and Lily heard the words. I tried to talk to David. I asked if everything was okay. He said, "Work is a lot right now, Mom. You know how it is." I nodded. I did not want to be a bother. I wanted to be helpful. I started making smaller plans, visiting less, thinking that maybe my help was too much. Then the letters came. Small printed envelopes with legal-looking paper inside. I thought at first it was a mistake. But the paper said things about long-term care and power of attorney and financial management. I didn't understand half the words. I asked for help at the library desk to make sense of them. I called a counselor, and she told me to read everything carefully and not to sign anything until I understood. I didn't sign anything. I noticed people at the party whispering before the announcement. I noticed Melissa watching me with a look I could not name. Once, Melissa left the table and returned with a small box. She placed it in front of David and they exchanged looks. I felt a cold weight in my stomach. I thought maybe I was imagining things. Maybe old age makes you see shadows where there are none. On the morning of my birthday, Lily and Ethan made me cards. Lily drew a house with a tree. Ethan drew a piano. David hugged me and said things that sounded normal. Happy birthday, Mom. Melissa kissed my cheek politely. I kept the cards in my purse all morning because I wanted to show them later. When the guests arrived, everything looked bright and safe. But under that brightness, something had been changing. A plan had been set in motion for weeks. I had a feeling, but not the proof. I did not want to believe that my son would do what he did. That is why I made the video. It was simple and quiet. I am not clever with cameras, but I know people. 2 weeks before the party, I sat in the living room and pretended to be sewing. I turned on my old digital recorder and left it on the table. I did not tell anyone. I wanted to hear voices when the house was empty. I wanted to know what they said when they thought no one listened. The recording caught more than I expected. It caught Melissa's laugh when she thought the kids were asleep. It caught the clink of glasses. It caught David's voice when it was low and not kind. On one clip, Melissa said, clear as day, once Mom is in the home, we can finally sell the house and split the money. We can put it into our account. Nobody will question it. David laughed and said, it's a good plan. We'll tell her it's for the best. She'll thank us for caring. They talked about the papers, the timing, what to say to the neighbors. They even laughed about a story they would tell about me being tired, needing more help. They sounded like people planning a trip, not like people planning to move living breath into boxes. I listened to the recording 100 times. My hands shook. Tears came, but I dried them and held my chin up. I knew I needed proof. I copied the clips onto my phone and made a simple video with the date on it. I added the part where Melissa mentions selling the house. I wanted the family to hear it all at once, to see the words on the screen and the faces on my son's face as he said them. So when David stood up at the party and told everyone I would be moving to a home, I was ready. I clicked the phone because I wanted them to hear truth in their own ears. I wanted to see what would happen when their plan met light. The video played in the warm backyard. It started with the small living room scene, then Melissa's voice came through clear. The sound of her talking about selling the house filled the air. People shifted in their chairs. David's face was hard to read. Lily and Ethan looked at me and then at the phone. When Melissa's face went pale, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sadness. I had hoped for a different ending, one where my son would protect me, where we would laugh about a misunderstanding and then hug. But the truth does not always give us the endings we wish for. After the first clip, people murmured. Aunt June whispered, I can't believe it. The neighbor, Tom, said, is that them? Someone asked David, is this true? David's joy tightened. He looked like a man who had not expected his plan to be pulled into the light. That was the less extreme part, a moment of hush, the slow turning of faces, the shifting of seats. People asked quiet questions. The kids clung to chairs. I stood very still and let the video play the part that showed David signing a paper with a pen and smiling at Melissa as if they had won something. I had recorded that too. I had taken a clip from a day when they took me to the bank to help with paperwork, and then left with a paper that later turned out to be part of the plan. Seeing his hand on that paper made my stomach drop, but I kept my face calm. I wanted them to know how long this had been. I wanted to show the pattern. I wanted to show that I had not made this up. Then the video skipped to a shot that made everyone rearrange their chairs. It was a short clip from the night before. It showed a small pile of envelopes on my kitchen counter. One was my bank statement. Another was a letter from the doctor saying I needed more help. The camera had been on the counter, and there was a shadow of 2 people leaning over the papers. A voice, David's voice, said, we will say she needs care. We'll explain to everyone. It will be easy. Melissa's voice replied, we get the house. We get the money. We can breathe. As the clip played, You could hear a little gasp from someone near the grill. Melissa's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She whispered no, her hands went to her face. For a moment, no one moved. Dogs in the yard whined softly. Someone clinked a glass by mistake. My heart felt very loud in my ears. I wanted to tell the children not to worry, that grown-ups could fix this, but my voice felt small and far away. Then the extreme thing happened. A loud crack went through the yard. The string of lights that hung over the table snapped and went dark. The music stopped. For a breathless second, the whole party sat in a black hush. Someone yelled, "What happened?" A chair scraped. Lily started to cry softly. The birthday candles guttered out like tiny stars being put to sleep. In the sudden dark, the video on my phone kept playing. The screen glowed like a small lantern. On it, Melissa's face looked smaller and paler. She stepped back, one foot catching on the edge of the rug. A glass fell from a hand and shattered, the sound loud and final in the dark. I heard someone gasp and then a panicked whisper, "Call the lights." Another voice said, "Is that David?" I could not see their faces in the black, but I could hear their breathing change. Someone flicked on a flashlight. A neighbor ran to the fuse box. The darkness was not just a break in the light. It felt like the world had closed its curtains on something that could not be unseen. I stood with my phone in my hand, the small bright video still playing, and felt every face in the backyard turn toward me. I felt the weight of my life and the sharp edges of the truth pressing into me. I had done what I thought I had to do. I had shown them proof. I had let the light in. But the room was full of questions. David's mouth was a hard line. Melissa's white face looked like paper. Someone was crying. The children were confused. The cake sat half-cut on the table, frosting melting in the warm air. The first freeze frame of the video hung on the phone like a warning. And then, before anyone could say anything, before the fuse box was fixed, before a voice could explain, another sound cut through the yard, a sound that made everyone still. It was the chirp of a text message from David's phone. The notification sound was small, polite, ordinary. But the name that lit up on his phone at that moment was not his boss. It was a name that made Lily cover her ears. Bank of the City, urgent. The backyard went very quiet. In the dark, I could hear the wind in the trees and the distant beep of a lawnmower. I could hear the soft sobs of someone sitting on the steps. The phone screen in my hand showed Melissa's face, pale and shocked. The video continued to play, and the next clip was about to start. What came next would not be small. What came next would break the half-hidden things and make the whole neighborhood look at us and choose sides. I pressed my thumb to the screen to pause the video for a second, to breathe, to steady my hands. I could see the porch light come back on across the street. I could see the glow of neighbors' phones as they tried to record too. I smiled again, because a smile hides a kind of strength. But behind that smile, I felt tired and very small and very brave. The next clip on the video was cued. The words on someone's lips were ready to be heard. I held the phone up so everyone could see. The lights hummed as power began to come back. A soft electricity touched the paper plates and the paper cups. A neighbor cursed softly when she saw her spilled drink. Lily started to sniffle. Ethan rubbed his eyes. Then the video moved to the next scene. The frame changed, and on the tiny screen I saw something I had not expected to see. It was a small piece of paper, folded and creased, with a name on it. The camera focused. The letters were clear. The name was mine. Before I could say anything, before I could warn them not to look, before I could protect the small, private things in my life, the screen filled the air and the backyard felt like a stage. People leaned forward. Someone muttered, "Helen, what?" The words on the paper were not just my name. They were a line from a document that would change everything. The video kept moving. Melissa's pale mouth opened. David's face went a color I had not seen before. I did not finish the video. I did not tell them what the paper said. I held the phone and let the clip stop exactly on that name, that line, that proof. The yard was full of a kind of quiet that made my ears ring. The power hummed back to life in a slow, small way. The string lights flickered and glowed again like tiny moons. The neighbors shifted like birds. I smiled one more time, but it was a smile that knew sorrow. Around me, people reached for their phones. Questions rose like steam. David opened his mouth, but his voice did not come out the way he wanted. Melissa sat down abruptly on a folding chair and put her face in her hands. Someone said, "This is wrong." Then, something else happened, something that made the cold go all through me, and I knew this was not the end of the story. The sound of that text from the bank, the paper on the screen with my name, the spilled glass, the sudden dark, these things had set a chain into motion. The birthday candles had been snuffed. The video paused on my name. The yard waited, breath held. I stood there, phone glowing, and listened to the world hold its breath. The next thing to happen would change everything again. The yard smelled like cake and cut grass. People were leaning in like birds listening to a strange sound. The video on my phone had stopped on my name. For one long second, no one moved. Then David stepped forward like a man about to do something he could not take back. "Mom," he said, his voice tight, "stop this." "You can't," his words broke. He looked around at our family like he hoped they would help him. Some faces were confused. Some were kind. Some looked betrayed. Melissa looked like she might faint. Her hand shook as she pulled at her sleeve. She had always been tidy and quick with words. Now her voice left her. She sat back on the folding chair and put her face in her hands. Lily ran to her and wrapped small arms around her legs, asking, "Mommy, why are you crying?" I felt my heart like a small drum in my chest. I was afraid for Lily and Ethan. I was afraid for myself. But I held my phone like a shield. The video was proof. It was the only thing I had that showed the truth of what they had been planning. "David," I said softly, the kind of soft that makes people listen. "Please, tell the truth." He stared at me as if he could not see me for a moment. Then he looked away and picked up his glass. He stared at the drink like it held the answers. "You went through our things," he said finally. "You shouldn't have." "I listened," I said. "When you thought no one was listening." My voice did not shake. "I wanted to be calm for the children." "You had no right," he said. He took a step toward me. His face was red. "You betrayed us." There was a breath I could feel in the air. Aunt June stood up slowly. "Helen," she said, and her voice was soft like always. "Let's talk like adults." "Talk." David laughed, a short, bitter sound. "We already talked. They already made plans." He pointed at Melissa and then at the video. "That recording is taken out of context," he said. "You edited it. You've always been dramatic, Mom." I wanted to press play and let them watch the whole truth. But I knew how people listen. When a man with his palms open says, "She's dramatic," other people think they should believe him. That is how lies grow legs. "Let them hear the rest," I said. "Listen to everything." I touched the screen. The video started again. The next clip was softer. It was from a late afternoon when the house smelled like coffee. My hands had been busy folding laundry. The camera had been on the kitchen counter, watching the doorway. The clip showed Melissa and David moving like two people who knew each other very well. They walked with small, careful steps. They spoke in low voices. Melissa said, "If we move, Mom, we can list the house as for sale as soon as the papers are signed. We'll tell the realtor we need a fresh start. We'll say it's for her care. They'll understand." She smiled in the clip like she thought this was a bright, clever plan. David nodded. He rubbed the back of his neck. "We'll tell the neighbors we had a family emergency," he said. "We'll put Mom in a nice place with good care. She'll get used to it. We'll get the money and pay off our debts." Hearing those words in his own voice made a cold wind sweep through me. It hurt in the old places where a mother keeps all the small hurts. People around the backyard made soft noises. Some covered their mouths. My sister, June, put her hand to her heart. The neighbor, Tom, said, "That's," and could not finish. David moved his hands like he wanted to take the phone. "Give me that," he demanded. His voice was whisper sharp. He reached toward me. I had known he might do that. I had practiced being ready. My thumb was on the pause button, but my other hand held the phone steady. "Please," I said again. "Just listen." He lunged for the phone. For a second, his fingers grazed the screen. I tightened my grip. A neighbor shouted, "Hey," because no one wanted to see a fight. David pulled back like he had been stung. He breathed rapidly, like a man who had run. "You're ruining us," he said. "You're ruining our family." There was a mixture of anger and fear in his voice. He sounded like someone who had just lost his map. Melissa put a hand over her mouth and sobbed into it. "David," she said, "we can fix this. Call them. Tell them she's confused. Tell them." "Call who?" Aunt June asked. "Who are we going to call?" "I'll call my lawyer," David said, trying to be steady. He walked toward the house and took out his phone. For a moment, I thought he would leave. Instead, he tapped numbers like someone trying to find a lifeline. Ethan, who had been staring at the phone with big eyes, tugged on my skirt. "Grandma," he whispered, "are you okay?" I stooped and picked him up and hugged him close. His tiny body smelled like sunscreen and summer. He whispered, "I don't like this." I wanted to say everything would be fine, but my throat closed. David kept talking on the phone as he walked. "Hello?" "Yes." "I need to know." "No, that's not right." His voice was urgent. I could not hear the other side. He walked to the side of the house where the grill was and leaned against the siding like he was about to faint. Melissa got up and went to the car. "I'll go get the kids' things," she said. Her voice was distant like she was moving away. "No," I said. "They are not going anywhere." Lily hugged Melissa's legs and looked at me with wide eyes. "Grandma," she said, small and unsure. "Are you moving?" "No," I said. "Not now." My voice shook at the edges. I wanted to sound sure for Lily. I wanted to be a place of safety. A man from down the street, Mr. Alvarez, who was always handy, walked over and said, "Helen, would you mind if we step inside and talk? This is a lot." He spoke gently, like he wanted to help. Inside, the house smelled the same as always, lemon cleaner and old books. The recording sat on the phone like a small heavy stone. We moved into the living room like a slow procession. People wanted to understand. They wanted to see the face they knew as a map for what had happened. I pressed play on the next clip. This one was quiet. It was a day when David had come by with a stack of papers. He had asked me to sign something saying I needed more help, saying I could not manage alone. He had said it would make things easier. He held my hand and said, "It's just a form, Mom. We'll take care of everything." I remember that day clear as glass. I remember the way his palm fit around mine like it always had since he was small. I remember how he smiled like he wanted to pretend everything was okay. I remember signing because I trusted him. The video showed his hand on the pen. It showed Melissa holding a paper in the background and smiling like they had solved a puzzle. As the clip played, words appeared on screen. It said, "Power of attorney. Consent for care. Temporary guardianship." I felt sick. I had not known what those words meant. I had signed because I was tired and trusting. I had thought they would use those papers to help me. I had not known that they would use them to push me away. "David," I said quietly, "what did you make me sign?" He did not answer. He looked like the ground had fallen away under him. For a moment his face was the color of wax. A neighbor, Mrs. Patel, gasped. "Helen, you must go to the bank," she said. "You must tell them that was not your choice." I wanted to, but my chest felt like it had a weight on it. "I will," I said. "I will go to the bank." Just then, Tom, the neighbor who mowed his lawn perfectly, said, "Wait." He held up his phone and played a voice message he had recorded a minute earlier. On it, you could hear Melissa talking to someone on the phone. Her voice was sharp. "Yes," she said. "We're almost done." He signed today. "We can list the house next week. The papers are set." The voice message was like another brick. People looked at Melissa like they could see through her. She sat very still. David put his head in his hands. The smaller, calmer moments in the living room had to come. People sat and tried to make sense. Some held the children. Some offered me water. Aunt June folded a napkin like she was making a small paper boat and gave it to Lily to hold. Life tried to act ordinary, to soften the edges. That was the less extreme part, people whispering, crying softly, hugging. But even in those quiet moments, a new worry grew. How far had their plan gone? Had they already put names on title papers? Had they already forwarded bank details? The backyard felt like a web with many threads. I started to make a list in my head. Bank. Lawyer. Social worker. Paperwork. Proof. I would have to go to the bank, to the lawyer, to the doctor who had written the note that started this. I would have to ask for the papers, for dates, for signatures. I felt a strange strength settle over me. This was not just about me. This was about telling children that family must be kinder than that. David left the house and walked to his car. He paced around it like a man waiting for a storm to pass. He kept his phone pressed to his ear. I could see the trembling of his shoulders. He looked not like a man who wanted to hurt me, but like a man who had been pushed into a place he did not want to be. Melissa came back with a small bag. She tried to pick up Lily and Ethan, to take them into the house. "We'll go upstairs for a minute," she said. "We'll talk." Her voice was thin. "No," I said. "You don't need to go anywhere without telling me." I sounded louder than I wanted. Lily clung to Melissa's leg and looked between us. Her eyes were like two questions. David walked back and slammed a palm on the hood of his car. Dust flew. "Stop this," he said. "You're making a scene." "You started the scene," I said. I felt a tiredness that came from years of small hurts. "You planned it." He turned to me, and, for a second, something like regret flashed in his eyes. He looked at the kids and then at the small crowd gathered like curious birds. "We're trying to do what's best for you," he said. "You don't understand." "I understand enough," I said. "I understand that you wanted the house. I understand that you talked about selling it." My voice was steady. David's jaw clenched. He spun and walked away. He got into his car, slammed the door, and drove off quickly, dust rising in his wake. The back of his head was rigid like he had braced himself for this. Inside, Melissa sat down and put her head in her hands. She shook like a leaf. "What did you expect?" she whispered. "We needed to do something." A silence sat in the room like a heavy blanket. People looked at Lydia and Ethan, who were clinging to their mother. I saw the little hands. I kept thinking of the long nights I had spent tucking them in, singing songs, and making toast at dawn. I thought of how quickly a home can change when people forget to be kind. I called the bank from the kitchen and asked to speak with someone about recent changes. The person on the phone said she would transfer me to the records department. I asked if any accounts had been moved. The voice said she had to check, then asked my name and date of birth. I told her and then waited like someone waiting for a slow clock to move. She said she could not share details over the phone and asked me to come in. That was a small victory. The bank had not frozen everything yet. As we waited for the next thing to happen, someone knocked on the front gate. A soft, steady knocking like a heartbeat. We all went quiet. The knock came again, more urgent. A voice from outside called, "Police." "Mrs. Parker? Are you Helen Parker?" The voice was not loud, but it carried a weight like thunder. Everyone turned. My heart knocked in my chest. Aunt June held my hand like a small lifeline. The children clung to Melissa like they did not trust the world. I walked to the door slowly. My legs felt like they were made of old softwood that creaked when I moved. My hand shook on the latch. The knocking came again, this time with a new sound under it, the far-off wail of sirens, small and thin at first. "Police?" I asked, and my voice was the kind that needs a blanket. "Yes," the voice said. "We received a report about possible elder financial abuse. We'd like to ask you some questions." My mouth went dry. I had made a call earlier that morning to a hotline, sitting on my old kitchen chair and trying not to cry. I had not expected the police to come so soon. I had not expected the knot of tension to become real police shoes on my porch. I had made that call because I wanted to know my options. I wanted someone to see the papers. I wanted someone to help me understand. Outside, a uniformed officer asked if he could come in. His face was kind but steady. He asked for my name, my date of birth, and whether I had anyone with power of attorney. I told him about the papers and about the recording. He listened and wrote in a small pad. "We'll take statements," he said. "We'll get copies of the documents. We'll check any recent transfers." Melissa stood up quickly, pale as though someone had poured milk over her head. She grabbed her bag and hurried to the front door. "We have to go," she said, but her voice sounded thin and unsure. David's car was still in the driveway, though he had driven away. He came running back like someone who had been called by a bell. His breath came fast. He stopped at the gate and looked at me as if looking for permission. His eyes were tired and a little wild. "What's this about?" he demanded of the officer. "This is my mother's home. She lives with us sometimes. This is a misunderstanding." The officer looked at him calmly. We received a report from a family member about concerning changes in her accounts and possible undue influence, he said. We need to check documents and speak with everyone. David's face went a shade paler. He looked at the house, at the crowd, and then at the video phone in my hand. For 1 second, it was like a curtain pulled back and everything changed. People who had been calm now watched like they were at the end of a play. A neighbor asked quietly, "Helen, did you call them?" I nodded. "Yes," I said. "I asked for help." The officer asked for the phone. I handed it to him. He watched the video, his eyebrows moving slowly as he listened. He did not show surprise or anger. He just wrote. He asked me for copies of the papers I had signed. I gave them to him trembling. He took them and said, "We will look into this." Outside, another car pulled up slowly. The sirens grew louder, then softer again. A man in a suit stepped out. He had a badge around his neck, and he folded a paper silently. He walked toward the house like someone who had walked a long road to get there. People murmured. Melissa stared at the suited man as if he were a ghost. David took a step forward like he wanted to speak, but then stopped. The man in the suit looked at me with eyes that were tired but kind. "Mrs. Parker?" he asked. "I'm from Adult Protective Services. We received a report and wanted to check on you." My throat closed. This was more than I had hoped for. This was the world opening a door wider than my small phone screen. This was help that I had not known if it would come. I felt a strange relief, like a weight lifting, and yet another like a stone settling. People gathered near the gate to see what would happen. The children clung to their mother. My own heart felt like it was beating a new song. Then, as the man in the suit reached the gate, a new sound cut across the yard, a sharp, angry shout from across the street. Someone shouted, "What is going on here? Are you arresting them?" The voice belonged to a man who recognized David and wanted to protect him. Before anyone could answer, the man in the suit raised his hand and said, "Please, everyone, stay calm. We're just here to talk." The sirens grew closer. The officer on the porch closed his notebook. He looked at me and said, "Mrs. Parker, we'd like to take you to the station for a short interview so we can get everything on record. It's standard procedure." My heart pounded. The children clung to their mother like burrs. The crowd around the porch shifted like a living thing. Then, without warning, a car screeched around the corner and stopped in front of the house. Its headlights cut through the late afternoon like knives. The driver jumped out and ran toward the gate. He was out of breath and his face was red. He shouted, "You can't take her. She's my mother." His voice cracked like a rope. People froze. The yard smelled suddenly of hot metal and tires. The officer turned. The man's face was bright with fear and anger. The man at the gate reached for me with hands that shook. "Helen," he said. "Don't let them." I did not have time to answer. The sirens were almost here. The officers looked at each other like two people who have read the same map. The man in the suit held out his hand as if to stop the world. Then, in that charged moment, something else happened, a small detail that pulled the curtain down even further. The phone in my hand, still glowing with the paused image of my name, buzzed. A new message popped up on the screen. The sender was labeled, "Bank of the City, Transaction Alert." I saw the words with a sharpness that made my lungs hurt. It said, "Transfer pending $120,000 from Parker Residence Account, Beneficiary, Parker Family Trust, authorized by D. Parker, date, today, immediate action required." The words were like a hot coal. The people on the porch heard the name. David heard the words. His face went white. Melissa let out a sound like a small animal. The officer's eyes moved from the phone to the man at the gate. For a moment, everything was still. The air was thick like soup. The sirens were almost close enough to shake the cups on the table. Then, the suited man lifted his radio and spoke into it in a voice that was flat and businesslike. "We need the bank to put a hold on that transfer," he said. "This could be a fraudulent attempt. Lock the accounts. Don't let anyone touch anything." People breathed in and out as one. The children cried softly. David's shoulders trembled. Melissa sat very still and pressed her palms to her face. Outside, the police lights flashed blue and red, painting the backyard in colors like a storm. The sound of boots on pavement came closer. The suited man looked at me with a steady gaze. "Mrs. Parker," he said, "we're going to help you. But we need your cooperation." I felt a strange lightness and a sharp fear all at once. I nodded. My hands were cold. I handed him the papers and the phone. He took them gently like something fragile. The neighbors watched. Some whispered, some cried, some moved closer like they were sharing warmth at a cold window. My sister held my hand like a small boat. Then, just as the first officer moved to call the bank himself, another car pulled up at the curb. It was black and glossy and moved slowly. The driver's window rolled down and a man in a suit leaned out. He spoke with a voice that came from years of power. "Mrs. Parker," he called. "We represent the Parker Family Trust. We need to speak with your son about the property." People turned like the whole world had spun. David looked as if he might faint. Melissa stared like someone watching a storm. I felt my heart beat like a drum inside a hollow chest. The man in the black car looked at us with a small smile that did not reach his eyes. He tapped his watch and said, "This must be settled now." The officer took a breath and looked from the man in the black car to me. The sirens wailed like a sad song. The children clutched each other. The suited man from Adult Protective Services stepped forward and said, "No one moves any funds until we investigate." The man from the black car laughed softly, a dry sound. "You can try," he said, "but we already have papers. We'll need to see them." At that moment, the backyard seemed to shrink to the size of a small stage. Every eye was on the papers, on the phone, on me. I felt like someone standing at the center of a storm with a small lantern. My phone buzzed again with messages. The world felt very loud. Then, from inside the house, someone screamed. It was high and full of a kind of raw fear. Lily had run into the kitchen and opened a drawer. She had pulled out an envelope and held it up like a treasure. On the front, in big block letters, was the word, "Sale Agreement, Parker Residence." The scream made everyone move like a flock. The man in the black car turned white. The sirens were almost on top of us. The officer closed his notebook and stepped forward. The last thing I heard before the chapter ended was David's voice, broken and small, saying, "No. No. This can't be happening." And the sound of the sirens drowning the world for a moment like the sea swallowing a shore. Outside, the blue and red lights flashed faster. Someone shouted for calm. The gate banged as it was opened by strong hands. The man from the black car took a step forward. The suited man put his hand on my shoulder. And in the middle of it all, with the phone still warm in my hand, the house on the porch, the papers pushed between us like knives, and the children watching like small lights, I knew the next thing to happen would change everything again. The air outside my house felt heavier than the sky itself. Blue and red lights washed over the driveway, the porch, the neighbors, even the balloons still tied to the fence. Everything looked like it had been dipped in trouble. My heart beat so hard that I could feel it in my fingers. I stood there, holding the phone that had turned my quiet birthday into a battlefield. The officer closest to me murmured into his radio. The man from Adult Protective Services stood at my side like a tall shadow. The lawyer-looking man in the black car waited with the calm confidence of someone used to walking into family fights and leaving with signatures. And David, my son, leaned against his car with both hands in his hair, shaking his head over and over as if he could rewind the world. Then the scream came again from Lily. She clutched the sale agreement envelope in both hands like she had found a monster inside it. Her eyes were wide and scared. Melissa grabbed for the paper, but Lily stepped back quickly. "Mommy, why does it say Grandma's house?" she shouted. Everyone froze. Children tell the truth louder than anyone. Melissa snatched the envelope from her daughter and shoved it behind her back. "It's nothing," she said too fast. "Just grown-up things." But the officer had already seen the bold black letters. "Ma'am, I'll need to look at that," he said. Melissa hesitated. Her hands trembled. Slowly, she held out the envelope. The officer opened it carefully, like it could bite him. Inside were several pages, signed pages. He flipped through them, his face sharpening with each turn. "Mrs. Parker," he said to me, "this agreement lists the house as being prepared for sale within 30 days. I felt dizzy. 30 days, I whispered. "But I never agreed to that." "It's signed," the officer said. "By your son." And by your daughter-in-law. He looked at Melissa. You two aren't the owners. Why are your signatures here? Melissa's lips quivered. We thought she wouldn't understand the details, she said. We were helping. Helping? Aunt June repeated, voice trembling with anger she almost never used. By stealing her home? The crowd murmured like waves hitting rocks. David stepped forward quickly, palms out, voice cracking. This isn't what you think. We were overwhelmed. There were bills, debts, the kids' school, the mortgage. We weren't trying to hurt anyone. But you were willing to throw me away, I said quietly. David closed his eyes. The officer held up the folder. We need everyone to remain where they are while we go through these documents. APS is going to take Mrs. Parker's statement. No one leaves. No one touches their phones except her. The man in the black car finally stepped out, straightening his tie. Officer, this agreement was pre-approved by our firm. There's no wrongdoing here unless proven otherwise. Mr. Parker hired us for a reason. APS stepped between him and me. Sir, until we finish our investigation, you don't discuss anything with her. Understood. The lawyer gave a small, irritated smile. Of course. The house was buzzing inside, full of whispers and shock. People moved around slowly, afraid to disturb anything. The kids stood near the couch, holding on to each other. The man from Adult Protective Services walked me into the living room. Mrs. Parker, he said softly, I need to ask you questions. Do you feel safe here? I looked around the room, the walls with family photos, the couch where David had slept when he had nightmares as a boy, the table where I had sewn Halloween costumes for the kids. Safe? I used to think love alone made a home safe. But now, looking at the papers, the video, the lawyer, the panic on David's face, I wasn't sure of much anymore. I don't feel unsafe, I answered carefully. But I don't feel protected either. He nodded. We'll help. He took my statement with calm patience. I told him everything. The strange papers, the conversations I overheard, the clip where Melissa talked about selling the house, the bank message about the transfer. He wrote quickly but listened even faster. When I finished, he looked at me with a softness that made me want to cry. You did the right thing, Mrs. Parker, he said. This is exactly why APS exists. Before he could say more, the officer stepped inside, holding the sale agreement pages. Mrs. Parker, he said, this document also lists a second form, something that isn't here. Melissa froze. David looked up sharply. What second form? The officer read the title out loud. Transfer of ownership, preliminary. Almost everyone gasped. Where is that paper? The officer asked. David turned to Melissa slowly. Do you have it? She shook her head too fast. No. I don't know what that is. Yes, you do, David said, voice low and dangerous. You were in charge of the paperwork. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't take anything. I swear. If that form exists, the officer said, someone intended to remove Mrs. Parker from legal ownership. My hands began to tremble. I gripped the sofa arm to stay steady. Aunt June stepped forward, trembling with fury. How dare you? She raised you. She fed you. She worked 2 jobs to send you to school, and this is how you repay her. David looked like her words hit him like fists. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Then the lawyer cleared his throat, stepping closer. That secondary document, he said smoothly, is one your son asked us to prepare but never signed. It isn't legally binding yet. Where is it? The officer repeated. The lawyer's eyes flickered. He misplaced it. Where? APS demanded. The lawyer sighed. He said he left it inside the house. Every head turned toward the hallway. The hallway where Lily had found the sale agreement. The hallway where I kept my things. APS motioned to the officer. We need to search where documents might have been stored. The officer nodded. Let's start in the study. My study. The smallest room in the house, full of books and old memories. We walked down the hallway slowly. The lights flickered as if the house itself knew something terrible was coming out. The officer opened the study door. The room looked wrong. Drawers were slightly open. The file cabinet was unlocked. And on my desk was a folder I had not left there. A thick one. APS opened it gently. Inside, were dozens of financial papers, bank forms, medical statements, insurance files, all with my name, all touched by someone else before me. At the very bottom was the document they were looking for. Transfer of ownership, preliminary. Signed on behalf of Mrs. Helen Parker. Authorization, D. Parker. The signature on the buyer's line was not mine. It was a careful, shaky imitation. Not perfect, but dangerously close. My knees weakened. Aunt June caught my arm. David stepped into the doorway behind us. He stared at the paper like it was a gun pointed at him. I didn't sign that, he whispered. I never forged her name. I didn't do this. Melissa backed away from him slowly. David, look at the handwriting. You did this, he whispered to her, voice breaking. No, Melissa cried. I didn't. I swear I didn't. Why would I? But her eyes darted toward the kids. Toward the bills pinned to the fridge. Toward the life she was desperately trying to keep. APS closed the folder. This is now evidence. The officer stepped forward. Ma'am, sir, neither of you leaves this house. Melissa burst into tears. This isn't fair. David sank onto the hallway carpet, burying his face in his hands. A neighbor pulled out her phone, recording everything. It was the quiet kind of chaos, people shaking, whispering, crying, but the real storm was inside the room, inside that folder full of papers that had almost changed my entire life. Just when the officer turned to speak again, a loud crash echoed from the front of the house. Someone shouted, "The transfer went through." My heart nearly stopped. What? The officer barked. A man from outside, the banker-looking one, ran to the doorway, eyes wide. The bank system glitched. The transfer of $120,000 was processed before the hold went through. Gasps filled the house. Melissa staggered back. David's face drained of every drop of color. APS looked at me with urgency. Mrs. Parker, do you understand what this means? I swallowed, terrified. It means my money is gone. The officer stepped forward. It means this is no longer just a misunderstanding. The sirens outside switched off. Boots marched toward the house. 2 more officers stepped through the doorway. Is this the Parker residence? One of them asked. Yes, APS answered. And you're just in time. David stood, shaking uncontrollably. Melissa grabbed his arm. David, do something. But he just whispered, I didn't mean for it to go this far. The officer stepped toward them. Sir, ma'am, he said, we need to ask you both to come with us for questioning regarding felony-level financial fraud. And that was where everything exploded. Melissa screamed. David shouted, "No." The children cried and ran toward me. And I held them. Because no matter how the world was falling apart around us, they needed somewhere soft to land. The officers moved in. Neighbors watched. People whispered. APS stood in the hallway with the evidence. And right before anyone was led away, before the officers could finish their sentence, a new voice came from the front door. A cold, calm voice that froze everyone. It said, "You won't be questioning them today." We all turned. Standing there, holding another set of documents, was someone none of us expected to see again. The doorway felt colder than the rest of the house. Colder than the police lights still blinking outside. Colder even than the officer's voice when he said the word felony. Everyone turned toward the front door. Standing there, framed by the flashing red and blue lights, was a tall woman in a gray suit. Her hair was tied in a tight bun, and she held a folder thicker than anything the officers had brought. Her heels clicked softly against the wooden floor as she stepped inside like she owned the room. Melissa's hands flew to her mouth. David froze like someone had poured cement over him. My breath caught in my throat. Because I knew that woman. Everyone did. Her name was Catherine Holt, head attorney for one of the biggest financial law firms in the state. Specialist in property disputes, elder financial cases, and family trust fraud. And once upon a time, David's childhood best friend. He hadn't seen her in over 15 years. Not since high school. Not since the day he stopped talking to her without explanation. Not since she had cried on our couch, heartbroken that he had cut her off. But here she was. And she did not look like she came to save him. She looked like she came to bury the truth where no one could hide from it. The officer nearest the door stepped forward. Ma'am, this is an active investigation. We can't. Catherine held up a badge. Not a police badge. A court-appointed investigator badge. Everyone went silent. Even the officers straightened. She nodded once at them. I received the emergency referral 10 minutes ago. Power of attorney abuse flagged by the bank system. Transfer discrepancies. Real estate fraud concerns. And she turned her cold eyes to David and Melissa. Possible signature forgery. Melissa's knees buckled. She grabbed the wall. David's lips parted, but no sound came out. Catherine walked past the officers, her gaze steady, unreadable. She stopped beside me and gently placed a hand on my arm. Mrs. Parker, she said softly, I'm here to help you. My throat burned. Thank you. Then her gentleness evaporated as she turned toward David. I want both of you away from her, she said sharply. Now. The officers guided David and Melissa to the opposite wall. Melissa was crying, shaking all over. David stared at Catherine like he was looking at a ghost carrying every mistake he ever made. The kids clung to me tightly, their faces buried in my sweater. Catherine opened the folder she carried. Officer, she said, this file contains evidence supplied by the Parker family's bank. They flagged 4 attempts to access Mrs. Parker's funds in the last 6 weeks. She pulled out a paper. Paper after paper. Signed withdrawal slips. Copies of digital authorization attempts. Screenshots of transfers queued but canceled. A list of suspicious transactions. And finally, a printed screenshot of the exact $120,000 transfer that had gone through. She laid them like cards on a table no one wanted to sit at. The room spun for David. He grabbed the wall to steady himself. Kate, he whispered. Please. Don't do this. She didn't even blink at the nickname. Officer, before you proceed, I want to confirm something with Mrs. Parker. She turned to me gently. Did you authorize your son to manage your money? No, I said. I didn't know he was trying to. Catherine nodded. She looked back at David. Did you, at any time, she asked, receive permission from your mother to sign anything on her behalf? David swallowed. Hard. No. But I. So you admit, she said sharply, that you signed documents without her approval? That's not no, I didn't mean, Kate, please listen to me. We were drowning in bills. Melissa lost her job. The kids needed things. And Mom wasn't. Stop. Catherine's voice cracked like ice. Don't you dare blame her. Melissa wiped her face with trembling hands. We thought we could fix everything with the house money. We thought she would understand. Catherine stared at her, jaw tight. You thought wrong. The officer stepped forward. We have enough evidence to take them in for questioning. The fraudulent signature alone. Yes, Catherine said, but there's more. She pulled one last paper from the folder. A letter. With a hospital letterhead. My hospital. Signed by my doctor. My stomach twisted. This, Catherine said, is a medical evaluation stating Mrs. Parker is mentally incapable of making decisions for herself. A sharp gasp shot through the room. I took a step back. What? I never had any evaluation. You didn't, Catherine said softly. This form was submitted without your knowledge. She turned the page so everyone could see. There, slanted across the signature line, was another messy, almost fitting version of my name. Forged again. The officer's face hardened. Ma'am, did you submit this medical form? Melissa shook her head violently. I didn't. I swear I didn't. David whispered, no. I didn't sign the medical part. I didn't. Catherine took a breath that trembled, not with sadness, but with fury she was trying to hide. She lifted the printed paper and tapped it once. Mrs. Parker, she said quietly, this form would have legally stripped you of every right you have, including the right to stay in your own home. The words sank into me like stones. They had planned to move me. Erase my signature. Erase my voice. Erase me. I felt the kids pull closer. Their small hands clutched mine. Something in me broke, but it was not the soft part. It was the strong part. I trusted you, I said to David. My voice shook but did not fall. I trusted you with everything. David's eyes filled. Mom, we were desperate. You were cruel, I said. Desperation is no excuse to betray a parent. He broke then, collapsed onto his knees, hands in his hair. Melissa turned away, sobbing into her palms. The officers exchanged looks. "Ma'am," one said to Catherine, "with this evidence, we're proceeding. Both adults need to come with us." David lifted his face. "Mom, please, please don't let them take me. Not like this." But something strange happened inside me then. I didn't feel anger, or triumph, or even revenge. I felt sadness. Sadness so deep it filled the room like fog. "David," I whispered, "I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it to protect myself." He closed his eyes and cried in a broken, childlike way I had not heard since he was 9. That sound almost shattered me. Almost. But then, the officer reached for his handcuffs. He stepped toward David. He was seconds away from securing his wrists when, boom, the front door slammed against the wall. Every head snapped toward the sound. A woman rushed inside, breathless, sweating, holding a stack of papers. Her hair was messy, shoes half off, shirt wrinkled like she had run through a storm. It was Nurse Abby. My nurse. My favorite nurse at the clinic. The one who gave me peppermint candies after my appointments. She held up the stack of papers and shouted, "Stop. The medical evaluation. That's not the only document you need to see." Everyone froze. Even Catherine's face shifted, confused, alert. Nurse Abby ran forward, waving the papers. "There's something else. Something big. Something I found because the clinic's system flagged unusual activity." The officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, calm down. What's happening?" She shoved the papers into his hands. "These," she said, chest heaving, "are the rest of Mrs. Parker's medical files." The officer flipped through them. His eyebrows rose higher, and higher, and higher. "What is this?" he whispered. Abby pointed. "That form you saw earlier? The fake one? It wasn't just forged. The clinic's login system shows who accessed her file. It shows when. And it shows what was deleted." Everyone leaned in. Even the lawyer's face turned pale. Catherine snatched the papers from the officer and scanned them quickly. "Dear God." She whipped her head toward David. Her voice dropped into a terrifying whisper. "David, someone logged into your mother's medical portal last week using credentials tied to your home router." David shook his head. "I didn't do that." Catherine slammed the papers onto the table. "But someone in your house did." Melissa stepped back so fast she hit the wall. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Catherine picked up one page, the one circled in red. "This record shows a deleted medical note," she said. "A note stating Mrs. Parker is fully mentally capable, independent, and not recommended for assisted living." Melissa shook her head violently. "I didn't delete anything." "Then explain this," Catherine said, shoving the final page at her. Melissa read it. Her mouth fell open. Her face drained completely. David stepped closer. "What is it?" Melissa's voice trembled like a thin string about to snap. It's. She swallowed hard. "It's a recorded login from someone on our Wi-Fi." David frowned. "So what?" "Anyone could." "David," she whispered, eyes filling with dread. "It wasn't me." The room went silent. The kids stared. The officers waited. Catherine's expression darkened like a storm rolling in. She folded her arms. "Then who," she said quietly, "was in your house, forging documents, deleting medical files, and accessing Mrs. Parker's personal records?" Melissa's shoulders sagged. Her hands shook. She whispered one word. A word that froze the entire house. A word that made David turn slowly, like he already knew but hadn't let himself believe it. A word that made my stomach drop to the floor. She said, "Your brother." The word hung in the air like smoke. Thick. Heavy. Impossible to ignore. "Your brother." David's head snapped toward Melissa, confusion twisting across his face. "My, what?" Melissa backed against the wall, trembling. "Daniel." It was Daniel. The entire room shifted. Even the officers paused. Catherine narrowed her eyes. I felt my breath catch. Daniel. David's younger brother. My second child. He hadn't been at the party. He hadn't visited in months. He barely called unless he needed something. But he was the one who had asked for the Wi-Fi password last time he dropped by. He was the one who had argued with David about money. He was the one who once told Melissa, if Mom's house sells, you two could fix everything. Catherine stepped forward, voice sharp. Explain. Now. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. I didn't want to say anything. Not without proof. But he was here last week. She pointed at me with a trembling finger, we're at your checkup. My heart lurched. He was in my house? She nodded frantically. He said he was just picking up tools from the garage. But then I caught him coming out of the study. The study. Where all my documents were kept. Where the forgery sat in a drawer. Where my medical portal had been accessed. A cold shiver ran through me. David shook his head in disbelief. No, Daniel wouldn't. Yes, he would, Melissa whispered. He told me, if we pushed everything through quickly, he'd get a cut. He said he needed the money more than anyone. Whispers broke out among the neighbors. Aunt June gasped. The officer took notes rapidly. Catherine's voice sliced through the tension. Do you have any proof he accessed the documents? Melissa swallowed. Check the papers. Nurse Abby brought them. APS flipped through scanning for login metadata. His eyes widened. Here, look. The portal login came from a device associated with a user named D.ParkerGuest. That's not David. Catherine turned to David slowly. Do you still want to defend him? David didn't answer. His eyes were filling with something heavier than guilt, realization, and fear. I need you to think very carefully, Catherine said, stepping closer. Where is Daniel right now? David opened his mouth. But before he could speak, bang! Something slammed into the front door so hard the hinges rattled. Everyone jumped. Lily screamed and clutched my waist. Ethan hid behind the couch. The officer nearest the hall snapped to attention. Stay here. Do not move. Another bang, louder this time. Then a voice yelled from outside. Open the door. Now. It was a man's voice. Deep. Angry. Desperate. The lawyer in the black car backed up quickly, grabbing his briefcase like a shield. APS moved closer to me, as if anticipating danger. Catherine stepped in front of the children protectively. The officers rushed to the foyer. Identify yourself, one of them shouted. Silence. Then, it's Daniel. Melissa collapsed against the wall. David's face drained to chalk white. A cold wave crawled through me. The officer hesitated, hand hovering near his holster. Sir, step away from the door. But Daniel did not step away. Instead, he shoved something against the glass pane, a folder. A thick folder. The exact type used for property transfers. I have the signed contract, he shouted. Open the door. The officers looked at one another. One whispered, signed? By who? APS stiffened. Catherine's face darkened. The officer called out, step back, sir. We are conducting an active investigation. Daniel interrupted with a scream. A wild scream. Open this door or everything gets worse. The officer lifted his radio. We need backup at the front. Suspect may be attempting to force entry. David ran toward the hallway, shouting, Daniel, stop. But before he could reach the foyer, crash. Daniel kicked the door open. The wood splintered. The lock burst. The hinges shrieked as the door swung inward. He stumbled into the house, chest heaving, eyes wild and bloodshot. His hair was messed, shirt wrinkled, and in his hand was the same transfer of ownership document APS had just found, except now. There was fresh ink smeared across the page. My signature. In crooked handwriting. Still wet. See, he shouted, waving it in the air. It's done. You can't undo it now. You can't. But he never finished. Because Catherine stepped forward like a storm. You forged her name, she said in a low, deadly voice. And then you broke into her home. Daniel looked at her and blinked in recognition. Kate? What? Why are you? He didn't get another word out. The officers moved fast. One grabbed his arm. Another seized the document. A third stepped between him and the rest of us. Sir, the officer barked, you're detained pending investigation of felony-level forgery. Daniel thrashed. No, you don't understand. That money was supposed to fix everything. I needed it, I deserved it. You deserved nothing, Catherine snapped. David sank onto the floor, head in his hands. Melissa sobbed into her sleeve. The kids clung to me, scared and trembling. Daniel's eyes darted wildly around the room until they landed on me. Mom, he said in a cracking voice. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I swear. I just needed. I stared at him. This was my son. The boy who used to bring me dandelions. The boy who cried when he broke a toy and begged me to fix it. The boy who always needed more than I could give. But this was not a mistake. This was not a misunderstanding. This was betrayal sharpened into a knife. Daniel, I said quietly, you forged my name. He flinched. You tried to steal my home, I continued. My money. My life. How is that not hurting me? He didn't answer. He couldn't. The officers forced his hands behind him. The cuffs clicked. Melissa turned away. David started crying silently. Catherine watched with a steady jaw, arms folded tightly. The officer recited, you are being detained pending charges of fraud, forgery, attempted theft, and unauthorized access of protected medical information. Daniel stared at me with wide, wet eyes, like he expected me to save him. Like I always had. But this time, I didn't move. This time, I didn't step in. This time, he wasn't the only one hurting. APS turned to me gently. Mrs. Parker, we need to escort you and the children outside while we secure the scene. I nodded, legs shaking. The kids held onto me as the officers led us toward the porch. The air smelled like pine, smoke, and something bitter fear. Just as we reached the doorway, Catherine touched my arm lightly. You did everything right, she whispered. And we're not finished yet. Her words made my stomach dip. Not finished? I looked back over my shoulder. Daniel was being pulled to his feet. David stood frozen in the hallway. Melissa slid down the wall, covering her face. Papers lay scattered like broken pieces of a life that had almost disappeared beneath my feet. Then APS stepped beside Catherine and said something quietly, something that made her face go pale for the first time. He whispered, there's one more signature we haven't traced yet. Catherine's breath caught. On which document? The trust account, APS said. The one holding the rest of Mrs. Parker's savings. Catherine turned sharply toward me. Mrs. Parker, she said slowly. Yes, I whispered. We believe someone else accessed the trust. Someone, other than David or Daniel. My heart stopped. Who? I asked. APS looked at the papers again, then lifted his eyes. Someone who had access to the house. And to your personal files. Much earlier. Catherine swallowed. Mrs. Parker, she whispered. We think this may have started long before today. And just as she spoke, another officer rushed inside through the broken door, panting. Ma'am, he said urgently to APS and Catherine, you need to see this. It was found under the seat of Daniel's car. He held up a document. Not just any document. A notarized form. Stamped. Certified. Official. The title read, Beneficiary Change Form, Trust Account. New beneficiary. Name redacted. Catherine's eyes widened. APS leaned closer. The officer whispered the name to them. Catherine turned to me slowly, her voice barely a breath. Helen, she said. It's someone you know. The officer held the notarized form so carefully it looked like it might explode if he breathed too hard. The trust account document, the one that controlled everything I had saved across my entire life, fluttered slightly in the breeze from the broken front door. Every eye in the room turned toward it. The officer cleared his throat. This wasn't filled out recently. The notarization is old, almost a year. And the person listed as the new beneficiary is someone connected to the family. My stomach went tight. APS stepped closer. Let me see the name. The officer whispered it in his ear. APS's eyebrows shot up. Catherine reached for the paper next. When she saw the name, her face changed not with anger, not with shock, but with a kind of quiet, sharp hurt. A hurt that meant the betrayal cut deeper than she expected. She turned to me with slow, careful steps. Helen, she said gently, before I tell you this name, I need to ask you a question. My hands trembled. Lily squeezed one of them. Ethan held the other. My sister stood behind me like a shield. What? I whispered. What question? Catherine looked straight into my eyes. Who, besides your sons, had access to your trust documents last year? Someone who visited often. Someone you trusted. Someone who knew where you kept things. My heart fluttered painfully in my chest. Images flashed in my mind like old photographs. Someone watering my plants while I visited David weeks after Lily was born. Someone bringing me groceries after my surgery. Someone who insisted on helping me organize my files because the cabinet was too heavy for me. Someone who always knew when I was home and when I wasn't. My throat tightened. I only gave access to. My voice cracked. To one other person. Catherine nodded sadly. And that's the name on the form. A long silence filled the room, heavy as wet wool. Tears stung my eyelids before the words even came. I whispered the name before she did. My sister. Aunt June dropped her purse. Everyone gasped. Even the officers froze. But it wasn't disbelief on their faces. It was recognition. Because there, just behind me, standing with her hand still on my shoulder, was June. My older sister. My best friend. The one who held my hand all afternoon. The one who baked me pies when David was born. The one who sat beside me when our mother died. The one who promised, I'll always protect you. Her face went still. Not shocked. Not hurt. Still. As if the air had revealed a truth she had tried very hard to bury. Catherine held up the document toward her. This is your name, isn't it? The room became so quiet we could hear the soft crunch of broken glass near the door. June swallowed, her eyes darting quickly, too quickly, around the room. To the officers. To the children. To me. Helen, she breathed, I can explain. David's head snapped up. You? You tried to take Mom's money too. It wasn't like that. June cried. I never took anything. I added my name because I was scared something might happen to her. I thought I should be prepared. Catherine stepped forward sharply. Did you tell her you added yourself as the beneficiary? June went pale. Well, APS pressed. No, she whispered. Did she sign this form? No, she said again, voice cracking. Did you forge her signature? The officer demanded. June burst into tears. No, I didn't forge it. Daniel brought me a sheet one afternoon. He said Helen had asked him to bring it to me because she wanted me to handle things. I didn't question it. You signed a notarized form without reading it? Catherine asked tightly. June wiped her trembling hands on her skirt. I trusted him. You trusted him more than you trusted me? I whispered. June turned to me, horror on her face. Helen, no, you don't understand. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to protect you from them. She pointed at David and Melissa. Melissa let out a broken what? I saw the way they treated you. June sobbed. I saw how tired you got babysitting. I saw how they made you cook and fix things even when you were sick. I thought they'd drain you dry. I thought someone had to keep watch. So your answer, Catherine said in a low, cold tone, was to make yourself the owner of her entire life savings? No, June cried. I only agreed because Daniel said he'd handle everything. He said Helen would thank me later. David clenched his fists. You worked with him? No, not like that. I didn't know what he was doing. I didn't know he would actually take anything. I didn't know about the house. I swear on everything, Helen, I didn't know. Her voice broke into sobs. I stared at her. My sister. The one I trusted most. APS stepped between us. Mrs. Parker, this complicates the case. The beneficiary change predates all the recent fraud. It means this, whatever this is, began long before your son's involvement. June shook her head wildly. No, I didn't take anything. Check the accounts. There wasn't a dollar moved. I swear it. That's true, APS admitted. No transfer occurred under her name. But she prepared the ground, Catherine said tightly. Whether she meant to or not. June fell to her knees, crying into her hands. Helen, please forgive me. I never wanted this. I only wanted to keep you safe. Safe. The word cracked something inside me. That was the problem, wasn't it? Everyone thought they knew what was safe for me. David thought a nursing home was safe for me. Melissa thought losing my home was safe for her family. Daniel thought my savings were safe for his pockets. June thought controlling my trust was safe for me. And I had not been safe at all. I stood there, feeling older, and younger, and stronger, and smaller, all at once. The officer cleared his throat. "Miss Parker, you'll need to come with us for questioning about the forged transfer and the beneficiary change." June looked up, eyes swimming with tears. "But I didn't forge anything." "Maybe not," APS said gently. "But you signed something you weren't supposed to. And someone in this family has been using that signature as leverage." Daniel, hands cuffed, glared from the side. David looked broken. Melissa looked like her entire life had collapsed. The kids watched silently, clutching each other. And June looked like a woman drowning in the consequences of a single careless moment. Before the officers guided her toward the door, she turned to me with a trembling voice. "Helen, please, say something." My mouth dried. What could I say? I loved her. I truly did. But that love had been bent, stretched, bruised under the weight of choices she should never have made. "I'll talk to you when the truth is clear," I whispered. June sobbed again. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The officers led her gently out of the room. When the door closed, APS turned to me. "Mrs. Parker," he said softly, "I know this is overwhelming. But I promise you, we will untangle this. You will not lose your home. You will not lose your money. And you will not be alone." Catherine nodded firmly. "I'll represent you for free. Your family." I gave a small, tired smile. "You always were." The kids wrapped their arms around me. Their tiny warmth steadied my shaking body. David finally walked toward me. His face was wet. His voice barely a whisper. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I looked at him. For a long moment, I didn't speak. Then, "We'll talk," I said quietly. "But not today." He nodded, understanding that it wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it wasn't hatred either. The officers began gathering evidence. APS made calls. Catherine organized the paperwork. The storm outside my home. The shouting. The broken door. The lights. The crowds. All began to settle into a dull, exhausted quiet. But inside me, something new was rising. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Not hate. Strength. Strength I didn't know was still there. Strength built from the truth. Strength built from surviving the people who were supposed to protect me. I took a deep breath. The longest, hardest chapter of my life was ending. But this story, my story, was not finished. I walked slowly toward the porch, holding the children's hands as the sun lowered in the sky, painting everything gold. Behind me, my home, my real home, stood strong. And ahead of me, the beginning of something new. Something I would build for myself. Something no forged signature could ever take away. The sun was beginning to set, turning the sky gold and soft pink, but nothing about the moment felt gentle. My porch light flickered against the cracked front door. Officers moved in and out quietly. Neighbors whispered behind fences. Papers rustled inside the house as APS and Catherine gathered the last pieces of evidence. But on the porch, there was a strange kind of stillness. I sat on the wooden step with Lily tucked under my arm and Ethan leaning against my side. Their small presence felt like the only warm thing left in a day full of cold truths. David stood by the railing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, staring at the ground. He looked older than he was, worn, bent, confused, like a man who had finally seen the cost of his own choices. The officers had taken Daniel and my sister away for questioning. Melissa sat alone on the lawn chair, wiping her face with a trembling hand. She looked lost, like someone whose world had cracked open, and she didn't know which pieces could still be saved. Catherine stepped out of the house last, closing her folder. She walked over to me, crouched down, and spoke softly. "It's done, Helen. APS is putting a full freeze on every account connected to your name. Nothing else can be taken. Not $1. As of tonight, everything is protected." I breathed out slowly. "Thank you for everything." She placed a hand on mine. "You did this. You fought for yourself. I just helped shine a light. Her smile was small but real. I squeezed her hand, grateful in a way words could never explain. When she went inside to finish paperwork, the yard finally grew quiet. Truly quiet. And that was when David stepped closer. "Mom," he said softly, "can we talk?" "Please." I nodded. "Yes, David. Sit down." He lowered himself onto the step beside me, keeping a respectful distance, but close enough for honesty. He took a shaky breath. I don't know how I let everything get so far. How I didn't see what I was becoming. I thought I was protecting my family. I thought, if I just fixed the money problems, everything else would fall back into place. His voice cracked. But all I did was break the one person who always protected me. I watched him for a moment. His shoulders shook. His eyes were swollen. He looked like the little boy who used to run home crying after scraping his knee, except now, the wound was inside him. "David," I said gently, "I raised you to be better than your mistakes. Not perfect, but honest. Loving. And somewhere along the way, you forgot that." He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I know. And I'll never forgive myself for it." "You don't have to punish yourself forever," I said softly. "But you do have to change. You have to look at what you did and learn from it. For your children's sake. For Melissa's. For your own." He wiped his face on his sleeve. "I will. I swear I will. And David," I added, my voice steady but warm, "I still love you." His breath caught, and he leaned forward, resting his forehead on my shoulder like he used to as a child. Lily reached over and hugged him too. Ethan patted his back. For the first time in hours, the world felt a little softer. Melissa walked over next, hesitant, her face streaked with tears. She crouched near my feet, hands clasped. "Helen, I'm so sorry," she whispered. I let desperation turn me into someone I don't recognize. I was scared of losing everything. I thought pushing you into care would help us keep control. But I see now, it was cruel. And I am so sorry. I looked at her carefully. Melissa had always been proud, polished, put together. Seeing her on her knees, trembling, remorseful, it was a different woman entirely. "Melissa," I said quietly, "fear makes people do foolish things. But choosing kindness, even when you're scared, is what makes a family strong. You forgot that. But you can still find your way back." She sobbed softly, burying her face in her hands. I reached out and touched her shoulder. "That doesn't mean trust will be easy," I warned gently. "It will take time. Real effort. Real change." "I understand," she whispered. "I'll earn it. Whatever it takes." The porch lights hummed softly as evening settled around us. The children climbed into my lap again. For a long moment, we all sat together in silence, broken, healing, human. Inside the house, APS and the officers finished their final sweep. Papers were sealed as evidence. The forged documents were bagged. Daniel's folder, the one he shoved in the door, was gone, processed. Fear had shaped the day, but truth had ended it. Eventually, APS stepped outside. "Mrs. Parker," he said kindly, "we're finished. You'll need to come by tomorrow to give a final statement, but your accounts are secure, and your home is safe." Safe. For the first time, the word didn't scare me. "Thank you," I said. He nodded and walked away. Catherine followed, giving me one last hug. "Call me tomorrow. I'll help you through everything." Then they were gone. The officers packed up. The last patrol car pulled away. The sound of sirens grew faint, fading into the dark. The yard emptied. The neighbors slipped inside their homes. The air cooled. And suddenly, it was just us. My family. Wounded. Shaken. But still here. I stood, holding both children's hands. "Let's go inside." The broken door hung crooked on its hinges, but the house felt more like home than it had all day. The kids followed me in. David and Melissa stayed a few steps behind, giving me space. We stopped in the living room, the same living room where the first video had played, where the truth had cracked open. "Mom," David said quietly, "what happens now?" I looked around the room. At the scattered toys. The family photos on the wall. The home I nearly lost. "Now," I said gently. "Now we rebuild. Slowly. Carefully. Honestly. We learn from what happened. We grow stronger. I touched Lily's cheek. And we teach the children how to be better than all of this. I turned to David and Melissa. You two will go home tonight. You'll rest. And tomorrow, you'll start fixing what you broke, with me, with yourselves, with each other. But not by pretending none of this happened. By facing it. They both nodded, tears shining. And me, I continued softly, I'll start taking care of myself. Truly taking care of myself. Something I should have done long ago. Lily whispered, Grandma, you're not leaving us, right? I smiled and hugged her tight. No, sweetheart. I'm right here. No one is putting me anywhere. The children sighed with relief and curled into me again. David and Melissa stood quietly, letting that truth settle. And for the first time all day, there was peace. Real peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was honest. Because everything was finally out in the open. Because betrayal had been met with truth. Because heartbreak had been answered with courage. And because the people who tried to take my life apart could not take my strength. I looked around my home, still mine, still standing. And in a voice firm and full I said, this family will be better than what happened today. We will not let greed win. We will not let fear win. We will not let mistakes define us. Then I opened the curtains and let the last light of the day wash over us. A soft glow filled the room. A new beginning. Because in the end, revenge didn't save me. Truth did. Strength did. And love, the kind that survives broken trust, did. The storm had passed. But I was still here. Standing. Alive. And finally free.